Welcome back, everyone, to Season 3 of the Peak Sports Psychiatry Podcast. I'm Dr. Mark Allen.
And I'm Dr. Tommy Horn.
Whether you've been with us since episode 1 or you're joining us for the first time, thank you for spending some time with us. Our mission has been simple: to advance the conversation around athlete mental health while helping people better understand the rapidly growing field of sports psychiatry. We believe mental health isn't separate from performance. It is performance. And every athlete deserves access to evidence-based mental health care as part of the sports medicine team.
When we wrapped up season 2, we had no idea how much would happen over the past year. And the field continues to evolve, and we've been fortunate to grow alongside it.
Peak Sports Psychiatry has expanded our work with collegiate athletic departments, professional organizations, and sports medicine practices around the country. We've launched The In-Between, our athlete transition groups designed to support athletes through some of the most challenging moments in their careers, whether it's injury, retirement, graduation, or simply navigating life between seasons. We've also begun collaborating with ironmind.ai, exploring how wearable technology and objective physiologic data can complement clinical care and help us identify meaningful changes earlier, always keeping the athlete and human judgment at the center.
You know, Mark, it's also been exciting to watch sports psychiatry mature as a specialty. The American Board of Sport and Performance Psychiatry continues to grow, more and more physicians pursuing specialized training and board certification than ever before. And organizations across every level of sport are beginning to recognize that sports psychiatry isn't simply about treating mental illness. It's about helping athletes and entire organizations to perform, recover, and thrive.
You know, on a personal note, it's also been rewarding to see meaningful progress in athlete mental health advocacy. This year has brought many new partnerships and new educational opportunities and legislation here in Colorado, which we did, it was the Lysis Law, supporting mental health education for youth sports coaches. It's also a reminder that mental health belongs at the center of sports medicine, not on the sidelines.
And that's what season 3 is going to be all about. We'll continue bringing you conversations with leaders from professional sports, collegiate athletics, medicine, psychology, coaching, nutrition, performance science, and more. So our goal is simple, to take you behind the scenes of elite sports and explore what it really takes to help athletes perform at their highest level while remaining healthy as human beings.
And we honestly couldn't imagine a better guest to kick off the season.
Yeah, absolutely. So our guest today is Dr. Derek Sweet. Welcome, Dr. Sweet. Derek serves as the Chief Sports Psychiatry and Mental Performance Strategist for the newly crowned NBA champion New York Knicks. He also serves with the Jets, the New York Rangers, MLS. He teaches at Columbia University and advises leaders across business, government, and elite sports. And beyond his impressive resume, Derek has become one of the leading voices exploring the intersection of psychiatry, leadership, performance, and human flourishing.
More importantly, Derek is someone we both deeply respect, not only for his work, but for the way he approaches people. His philosophy reminds us that behind every elite performer is, first and foremost, a human being. So Derek, first off, congrats on an incredible season. Yay, Knicks.
Thank you.
But welcome to the Peak Sports Psychiatry Podcast, buddy.
Wow, thank you so much. I'm excited to be here. I'm a big fan of your work. And so thank you. I feel very honored.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's start with the obvious. Congrats, the New York Knicks. The New York Knicks are NBA champions.
Yes, they are.
So what's the last month been like?
Well, for me, it's been a hectic, long, and very, very, very grueling run because, as you know, in all sports, when you drive in playoffs, you're in a drive to winning a title, you're driving towards a goal. It's all consuming. So there was nothing in my mind but basketball and winning over the last month or so. I'm now in a situation where I'm completing my book and I'm at a log cabin that I have upstate and up near a lake and doing absolutely nothing these last few days. And it feels really odd. I actually feel guilty that I'm not doing something because for the last month, every moment has been a moment of directed activity.
Oh my gosh, I can only imagine a log cabin to write a book. That sounds kind of perfect. So has it sunk in yet that what happened? It took 50 years for them to win a title.
I think, yeah, well, look, I think for everyone has a different trajectory and journey with this, but for me, I think it's I'm still making sense of it because we've been so intensely busy in terms of making sure that every I is dotted, every T is crossed, and everything was working perfectly. And I didn't want my role or anything that I did to interfere with what was a phenomenal accomplishment. So I think I'm still coming down off of that, and I think that's why I find myself by a lake right now, just looking at things and just enjoying water and trees and swans or ducks or whatever they are floating on the water there. I can see it right from my window here, and it's really cool.
It sounds very grounding. I'm going to head out to a lake this afternoon with my family and try to do the same thing. We got to take care of ourselves. I'm interested, talk about that run and that drive, week after week after week. And most people think about the coaches, the players, the general manager, what they're going through during this time. But few people are thinking about, well, there's probably a psychiatrist in the background somewhere. So, we don't want to share anything confidential, but what does your role look like, as you're crossing the T's and dotting the I's during this championship NBA run?
Well, look, the role it doesn't change much, even though the pressure might be on and this public scrutiny might be higher. The role, as you know, in sports psychiatry, it's broad and it's situational, it's responsive, it's reactive. It's there to as a break glass in case of emergency type of situation that provides, I believe, a level of comfort and security to the moment. And we in support psychiatry, what I like about our role is that we are able to handle mental performance kinds of issues that come up and or mental health issues that might come up and potentially organizational psych issues that might come up. The thing about sports psychiatry that I've learned over 15 years of being with the team and 15 years of doing this is that you wear many hats and you're not just the clinician sitting in the office. It's so different that you're not a clinician sitting in the office just sort of, which I did for many years too, where you kind of sit next and you basically are the doctor and it all works for you and it's working beautifully because you have the upfront office, you have a time schedule, and you have essentially a time where you start and you finish and everything is structured and
Hmm.
beautifully laid out. It's not that at all. It's completely like, okay, what do I do next? What is the real, what is the next urgency, and how do I switch hats, and things have to happen fast. They don't happen in your 45-minute, 1 hour session where you get to muse and then you write notes after and you think it through and ruminate. All that we are all trained to do kind of goes out the window when you're doing sports psychiatry because you have to move at the speed of the ecosystem and you have to have the adaptability and the flexibility to change as is needed and still provide a level of structure underneath that,
Yeah,
based on science and evidence, right? So I think that's the art and science of the role.
100% art and science, and having those relationships over 15 years, I'm sure helps with making it not so much always break the glass. We always have that. We have situations that come up and we're very reactive, responsive. Prevention and getting to know, especially in an intimate setting like that with smaller teams, what does that look like throughout the year that's foundational so that you can have just a good impact as a sports psychiatrist?
Yeah, you make a good point there, Tommy. The idea of building relationships is so critical, I think, in sports psychiatry. I think it gets underrated as to how important that is. First of all, the term sports psychiatry can generate fear in anyone, and especially in sports. It's like, okay, psychiatry and sports, and what are you, and who are you, and are you going to be prescribing medications for me, and all of that. So I think we are always up against the stigma that comes along with this, the scrutiny that comes along, the hesitation. And I've spent a lot of time over the years really just building relationships and spending time nurturing those relationships and using those skills actually to set the foundation for potential conversations that might be more clinical down the line, or conversations that have to give a perspective that now is more scientifically driven. But it doesn't start there. It started, and you're absolutely right, it started with me being in the locker room or being in the cafeteria, being present on the flights, going to different cities or different games, just being around and being comfortable being a piece of furniture. I think when I first started, I'll never forget this. I think I was told, like, look, the best thing you could do is be a piece of furniture in the room. And you might imagine, as a physician, as a psychiatrist, as somebody who's directed hospital level
Mhm.
inpatient units and ran my own practice, it took a lot to kind of hear that, and then try to translate my medical training and education and my experience into a couch or into a piece of armchair or something. But essentially, I think that was a right. It was challenging to hear, because I didn't want to be a chair or a table or something people passed by and just got used to. But I had to understand that that was a part of it. Maybe not necessarily being actual furniture, but being like furniture in the room, always there, present, that people then one day, and actually what was said to me was like, well, look, maybe one day they'll just come and sit on you. So I
Santa's sweet.
it kind of does work that way, because I've had experiences where someone didn't speak to me in the beginning of the season and waited till towards the middle or the end of the season, after they had observed me carefully in all of my interactions and watched me. I didn't even know I was being watched, and then told me, hey, I'm not comfortable talking to you. So yeah, building across the length of a season, I think building those relationships early, especially before training camp, even in the off season, trying to figure out ways in which you can become familiar, and it does help. It does really help make the work easier when you have to, and the trust builds. Actually, that's the word that I was looking for. The trust also builds with that.
Yeah, I can identify with that 100%. It is humbling, and
Mhm.
we are leaders as physicians and have gone through all this training, but you have to take it slow before you take it fast, right? I mean, you've got to build that trust, and it is very uncomfortable to be a piece of furniture when you want to interject, early and often. But with time, as you mentioned, towards the end of the season, so rapid with the response to things. So I find that juxtaposition fascinating with what we do, and it's something you have to experience. It's a learned behavior. But if someone followed you around for a week, because some people say, what is a sports psychiatrist? We're always trying to define ourselves, but what does that look like a week in the shoes of Dr. Sweet?
So it depends week to week, right? It's the basic things, all right? That's a great question. So the basic things would be, you'd have to be comfortable getting up early, because I'm writing a book on sleep. So if you're following me around and you get access to my house, you'll see that by 6 a.m. or so, I'm up and I'm trying to write this book. And it's been a beer, because it's been over a year now trying to get this thing out. And then from there, I may have Zoom calls with clients. I still carry private clients in the private practice, full circle confidential. So we still carry private clients. So early on, I may have a couple of virtual sessions that have to get in. And then, depending on which team I'm working with, like, as you guys know, I work in both football, basketball, and I do consult for hockey as well. It could be mean going to a coaching meeting, or going to any kind of management meeting that I've been invited into, and then certainly attending a practice, depending on if there's practice or walkthrough or whatever that day, or film and all of that, and then being observing in that regard. And then after that, you might see me in the cafeteria, or, just schmoozing around and talking, again, building relationships. Then you may see me get pulled into additional meetings, like after lunch and all of that, depending on what the needs are. Because when you're with a team, you're with a family. In any family, there's going to be moments where dad wants to talk, or mom wants to talk, or brothers or sisters want to interact, or something's always going on. And if the trust has been built, over time, and there's a value in what you bring to that moment. Everybody in the family has a role, and they get consulted based on what the family has identified as their particular strength. So in my family, I'm a physician. I have a brother who's an attorney. I have another brother who's like a high level educator. And it's interesting how folks go to each person for what they need. And it's kind of cool. And that's sort of like what you would see with me. I would be called, and I think a sports psychiatrist plays all those roles. There may be education that you have to do. You may have, even though you're not a lawyer, if something legal comes up, people trust you and they may just want reassurance as they go through something. And not to mention, like, some of the issues transcend roles and responsibilities. Like sleep, for example, is a big area where I do a lot of work in, and that doesn't matter what your role is, then everybody comes to you for that and talk to you about that. So I find that something that comes up, and then towards the end of the day, it doesn't end, because that's when players and folks who are busy have the time, and then they want evening sessions. And so that's when the real work begins. It is in the evenings and later on, and those are more virtual sessions or in person as needed. And so then towards the end of the day, it's a question of reflecting and making sure that there was adequate documentation or accurate documentation, that kind of thing. So, and it can change from day to day. Something comes up in the news or something comes up, it changes everything. And then you have to drop that and deal with whatever is urgent and be a part of that. So that would be the day. And then there are days when there's not much happening, where you're just observing, and they look quiet. And I think that is what throws a lot of people off. They'll say, well, this dude is just standing around. Like, what the heck is he doing? But
He's just a couch.
Yeah, it's just like, he's just a couch.
No,
This table.
But you just described the beauty of being an embedded clinician, where you build relationships over time. You sort of fade into the background appropriately so that you become just a trusted individual. Our mentor and friend, Dave McDuff, talks about how basically, he treats while walking around. That's his approach. But he just becomes one of the people. It's just obviously trusted. It's not thought of as this stigmatized sports psychiatrist with a loaded word. He's just a team member. And another thing we talk about is how we don't treat athletes in a vacuum. We treat the sports family, which you were talking about, how it's just a family, and how mom and dad both probably have something to say about things and whatnot. So, yeah, there's so many stakeholders around the athlete, but it sounds like you wear a lot of different hats. It sounds like you have a lot of different interests outside of just being in a locker room. Wow. How much of your work involves prevention, performance? Obviously, you're a sleep expert. I want to hear about that on the day-to-day.
Yeah, it's all woven in, and it's really hard. Like, sometimes I get asked, well, what percentage of time do you spend with each? And it depends. It's fluid. So depending on if somebody has a problem, say catching the ball in football or something like that, or they dropped the ball a couple of times, or they missed a tackle, and they are skilled and technically know everything to do on the physical realm, and it gets bumped into my domain. That's more performance work, that's more mental skills work, and that could become and often that's more the work that I do with athletes across the board, even in individual sports. That's what really brings people in the door, because in my view, the ecosystem that I'm in, they're usually well. I call it the worried well from time to time, because people are generally well. They just sometimes run into something that is affecting their performance. That might be a technical skill and something that needs adjusting from a mental skills perspective. Could it be my level of motivation? Could it be my self-talk? Could it be that I'm not using visualization skills? Could it be that I don't have goal setting as part of what I'm doing, or I don't know the difference between process goals and end goals? Those are important skills that have to be developed, that are often taken for granted. And it's amazing to me how, when you come back to your mental skills, your focus, your execution, your level of emotional regulation, how you handle competitive stress. Do you even know what competitive stress is versus just general stress? And do you have a strategy? What is your strategy? Right? Your sleep, all of those come to me under the big umbrella of mental performance, and it's a wide gate. through which many performers come into the door and speak with me about. And if there is a mental health issue that may be co-occurring or underneath that needs to be addressed, then we actually have to stop and just literally say we're going to switch into this mode and then explain to them what the difference is between working in performance versus working in mental health, because there's certain nuances that come up. Yeah.
100%. Yeah, I think that's something we all deal with, when working with athletes. And you're very approachable. Anybody who's watching or listening, that'll come through in a strong way. And so that wide gate, they're going to go to you and they're going to say, look, this is what's going on, doc. I'm wondering two things. One, about that gray area where you do say, oh, let's stop. Let's document this as a mental health concern, because, we work in an ecosystem where there's thankfully, decreased stigma, more resources, more non-clinical resources, so performance staff, and sometimes they worry about pathologizing. It's all a performance issue, and if it's not, some people get uncomfortable. How do you work in that team-based environment and use your skills, but also within the organization, let them know, hey, this is a performance or a mental health issue?
Yeah, in some instances where I'm the only one where I'm wearing both hats, so I have to let management know and be aware of this dichotomy, or this split, I should say, of
Yeah.
both things, and really do to your point about education. That's where educating the organization and the leaders of the organization around what is mental performance and what is mental health, so they also have a clear understanding. So if you're working with a director of player development, or a science or a a chief medical officer who doesn't understand that or doesn't appreciate it, the thing about mental health, everything can get lumped into one thing. And so it's very hard to parse this out. So that's the job, I think, of the sports psychiatrist, if you're wearing both hats. And I do wear both hats in one environment. And then in another environment, there's a full performance staff with performance, all these performance levels of performance. You have performance psychologists and individuals who are really, they're CMPCs, they have certified mental performance coaches, and that's a little easier because we can then have a conversation around, okay, well, this is what you will handle, this is what I would handle. But just as I just mentioned, when I am operating in both roles, I actually expect the mental performance coach to be able to do what I am doing, which is to be able to say, all right, well, this has crossed into a mental health issue, and we need to stop, or we need to refer, and we need to be careful. Because one of the things that I've learned in sports psychiatry is that you don't want to work in an ecosystem where there's no escalation protocol for when things get out of control or are moving in a direction that shouldn't be. And if somebody says, I have this problem or that problem, you should have something that is clear, that regardless, you go to the psychiatrist and you get at least evaluated, because the risks are real when you miss that. So balancing that is a very um, intentional thing that I take on, and I do have like a written escalation protocol that I share with management, and I share with teams that are interested in that, and um, it really helps to be able to balance
Well, so,
those things.
so you have a very unique viewpoint because you work in pro basketball, pro
Yes.
football, professional hockey, Major League Soccer. How do those different environments differ?
Well, it's really important to take a step back if you're the sports psychiatrist or the provider, to understand what the ecosystem and the culture is for each, and what type of athlete is generally drawn, without stereotyping individuals, right? So we have to be careful about that, but understanding what type of culture they're in, what are the expectations of this culture, and how are they being handled and addressed, and how do they expect you to handle and address these, and can you align what you do with what already exists, and really appreciating the nuances, and that one size does not fit all
Yeah.
across the cultures, and even inside the culture, right? So I'm from Trinidad, for example, right? So I'm from Trinidad and Tobago. So I'm not a Jamaican, but people come to me who don't understand West Indian culture, And they're like, "Oh, you're from Trinidad, right?" I'm like, "No." They'll say, "Oh, you're Jamaican." Or Dr. Derek is great. He's a great Jamaican. I'm like, "I'm not a Jamaican." Then they're like, "Why are you so mad?" Well, I'm mad because I'm not Jamaican. I'm Trinidadian. I love Jamaica and I hang out there. That's my spot. But at the same time, I want my identity to be fully understood. And I don't want you lumping me in with all Caribbeans and all West Indian people as, Jamaican, right? W- so therefore we can't just say all hockey players are tough. They're the toughest guys in the world. And all football players, are tough and they get hit. And so, they're hyper masculine or all that. And or all basketball players are, they got all these egos. Those are some of the generalizations that you could fall into in the ecosystem, not understanding that we have, to your point, as you started on this podcast, which I love, is that there are human beings here.
Yeah.
And yes, the ecosystem might push for more toughness, or it might push for a quicker response to certain things, but you still have to understand who the person is. So I balance both the need of the organization and its culture with what the individual journey is inside of that and how it might be affecting them to live up to those needs, be in the mask or the kind of construct that puts them to have to respond this way, and creating a safe space to perhaps explore other ways or how to adapt or compete despite it, if that makes sense.
100%. It makes sense. It's beautiful the way you said that, because your impact as a sports psychiatrist goes beyond the individual athlete, and you modeling that psychological safety that you were talking about helps create the culture. And you've got all these individual human beings that are part of a team from different cultures that are coming together. And that's, again, it's a beautiful thing. And I would love to, just as an aside after this, compare notes on those escalation protocols, because I think communicating early and
Yes.
often with all sports medicine, psychology, CMPs is so important for the culture of the organization to know how to use you and how to use all of us to the top of our abilities, whether they're the athlete, front office, or support staff. That being said, I'm wondering with the individual athletes, they're coming to you sometimes with performance issues. The ones that are coming to you struggling emotionally as well. It sounds like you do a lot of work in the evenings. You have to be flexible, but kind of keep your own boundaries too. I imagine that's hard. I mean, I've got little kids, so evenings are hard. We're all in different phases of life. How do you balance that? How do you approach those situations when they need a little bit more time with you?
It's really tough. And there's no textbook. That's the thing, right? The textbooks are great. When you read sports psychiatry or sports psychology textbooks, I don't know how you guys feel about this, but everything just makes sense when you read it. And it's
Yeah.
like, oh, I can do this. And I guess it's just meant to make sense because it's a textbook, right? So, but when you walk into an environment where at 1 a.m. somebody calls you and says, "Hey, I'm having this issue," and you're in a multi-billion-dollar or million-dollar situation where everything kind of matters and it's urgent, and you're dealing with celebrity status individuals or individuals of high profile, and they can't just walk into an ER, or they just can't walk in because of the sort of the media scrutiny and all of what's going on. You do become like a lightning rod focal point for how do we handle this kind of thing? Can we put the fire out now and not let it escalate into a huge conflagration that just it goes out of control because tomorrow morning it'll be all the headlines? Or is there some back route that we can take that can get us to all the expertise that we need to handle this or not? And if I drew a boundary that was so hard that like after 1 p.m., don't contact me, just go to the ER, which is what I do in my private practice, and the difficulty with sports psychiatry and your regular practice, right? That's not going to fly. I have to respond. I have to be available and be that guy in that moment to help and to address this in real time because of the stakes of what's going on. Fortunately, it's not an everyday occurrence. So part of it is understanding that. And another part of it also is, again, having connections to other entities so that I could pick up the phone and say, hey, talk to this person or talk to that person or go here or do this. And that's why it's very important for these sports psychiatrists not to be an isolated figure and not see your role as part of being an ecosystem sort of manager. So you have to have off ramps that help you in moments where you need to pick up and call an ER or call another physician or call an expert in a particular subspecialty of mental health or general health, and be able to make those connections to help individuals. And that's where I think relationships come in. And so I haven't just built relationships inside the ecosystem. I have to have outside the ecosystem trusted relationships as well, so that when something comes up, I can be fluid and not just be alone with this, trying to figure it out.
So what you just described is what I think the real value add of a sports psychiatrist is in this ecosystem. We are that consult liaison rotation we did in the hospital, where
Yeah.
we were able to sort of like speak multiple languages and,
Yeah.
and meander between specialties and provide tangible advice that different specialties can follow. I mean, I think that's what we do here. And yeah, we do have to be available, especially if you're working within a team. You
Yeah.
kind of need to just recognize a part of the process is being available after hours or on weekends or whatever. I mean, we're recording this on a Saturday when all of us have a little bit of time. Um, but in private practice, you do have to have some boundaries. I just wanted to follow up a little bit as far as, again, the work that you do, which you are a unicorn in that you do mental performance work and mental health work in a lot. And for an organization, you're the person actually deciding where it is in that gray area where it like matches which hat you're wearing. And a lot of times in other organizations, it's very much delineated. There's the mental health people, there's the mental performance people, and who is it that's actually doing the triaging initially? I think we're moving to a system where maybe the mental health folks are being considered first because that's missed. That's not good, but we would
Yeah.
then refer to the mental performance specialist if you can't do it yourself.
Right.
That's why we see a lot of clinical and sport psychologists in organizations versus it just being one or the other. That's where I think a sports psychiatrist with the training we get plugged to the ABSPP with some mentorship, learning some rudimentary mental skills, language, and whatnot. We can do enough and also know when they can. We're not trying to pathologize. If anything, I think we're trying to make sure that the person's experience it's quite normal to be nervous or before a game or whatever, and we can actually help support them and get them hooked up with it. But we also have the knowledge to know when it's not going well. So, long way to say, do athletes usually come to you when they're struggling emotionally, or is it because their shot is off or they're not catching that ball? Where are you seeing most of it going?
I think athletes in general are very self-sufficient. They're very, to be cliche about it, I feel as if high performers across the board, it could be in dance, for example. When you're a high performer, you're already kind of in an independent role where you have to trust yourself and you want to be the alpha. You want to know that you're the one that's handling this, and you don't want to look and seem vulnerable. It's very important that you don't come across as needy or vulnerable or having emotional issues or problems that needed help. It just doesn't work. And I think just being a man, we can I think men in general, and I'm being very broad with this statement. In my experience to working with guys, even outside of sport, it's hard to come forward and say, hey, man, I need help with this or that, and I'm struggling emotionally. That language doesn't even always exist for guys. Maybe we get angry or we bang our fists on the table or we get into some other behavior that signals that we're doing that. And that might be the better way to go about trying to figure it out. So I don't get a whole lot of, in my experience, individuals saying, hey, I'm struggling emotionally. That happens. It does happen. But it's much more, I'm having problems with sleep, or I'm pissed off with this person, or there's some traditional gait that doesn't feel as psychological. Or I've had a moment where I had a panic, or I feel anxious about something. Those sleep, anxiety, I get more of that as the portal through which we could enter into a more emotional conversation. Or sometimes I'm having problems with my girl, or I'm having problems with my significant other, I'm having difficulties at home. I'm managing a parent who wants money, or I'm managing my wife wants me to take out the garbage when I come home. I just hit a home run, or I just scored a touchdown. I just won the winning shot, but I have to go home and do chores. What does that mean? Or I've retired or transitioned to another team, and I'm connected to you, and I'm connected to this, and I don't want to disconnect. And how do I do that? And so those are the portals through which we enter, but eventually we get to a place where the trust builds, and then we can talk more about what does it feel like and what.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you know what I love there, Derek, is you're meeting them where they are with their language about a relationship or about sleep. And I really do think like we need a whole nother episode on sleep after your book
Yep.
comes out.
Yeah.
I would love to just have a whole episode on sleep. But looking at all those dimensions, and I've read a little bit about you, and one thing that I personally value so much is the biological, psychological, social, spiritual, we'll throw that in there, aspect of these individuals we're working with. I think you bring that faith-based approach, and that's another portal. Can you talk a little bit about that and how
Sure.
your faith and being open to talking about faith comes into your practice?
Spirituality is huge. If you don't understand that gate and you don't have it available to you, you may be losing out on a lot, only because it's a gate through which so many players, so many performers enter, and it's where they feel most comfortable. In fact, if you can, I always tell people I feel like I speak multiple languages. I speak biology, I speak psychology, I speak sociology, and I speak spirituality. And if you can speak, you don't always have to speak the exact language of the person. So we can have two different faiths, but we understand the importance and the role of faith in what we do, or we understand the importance of a higher power or the mystery that we call God. However we want to approximate that or approach that is important, because that is often where we have an opportunity to learn how this person is navigating a potential stress or a difficulty that they're dealing with. And it's also the opportunity not just to learn how they're handling it by saying, well, so in your faith, how does one deal with when they get insulted or when they get pushed back or when somebody says something awful to you, or what have you learned through your faith? Help me understand from your perspective. How does your faith ask you to deal with that? And do you feel like you can do that, or is it difficult? And we can use this conversation now to back into, well, here are some other things too that from my perspective, if it feels right, this is what I've learned too. And we can unpack it and work through it and then develop goals out of it. Because in most faiths, there's a higher level of just sort of expectation that either sets the bar too high for the person, they feel guilty or upset that they can't do it, or they have just abandoned it completely and they kind of want to find a way back to it, or it provides a North Star, something to work towards. And so there's so many opportunities there to do it. I've done things where we've given players who are Christian, for example, they've looked at healing scriptures or recovery scriptures. We've looked at identity, the Psalms, or we've taken something like David and Goliath. How cool is that? How convenient for the sports psychiatrist or anybody to use David and Goliath, right? It's like a no-brainer. You got something large here, you got something small here. I'm going uphill. I got to fight. I got to win. There's just so much motivation in that without necessarily becoming hyper-religious, right? So I also do a lot of work with chaplains. I actually have I've been invited to speak with team chaplains, and that's also cool. And I've often been invited to like a church or something where there's a men's day or something like that. And I'm an ordained minister, so it's easy for me to get into that discussion. And I've challenged myself to go across faiths. Could it be Jewish? Really learn from Jewish brothers and sisters. What is it? What are some of the lessons that I could learn from that faith? Or if somebody is from Islam or from Christianity, there's always something you can learn. And I think that posture has helped a lot. Now, when it comes to medication, it's interesting. The faith may or may not agree with that. But healing is often a huge part of most faiths. and then learning how to navigate the conversation so that we can get the medication in, if we can, by aligning it with the faith, or adopting a temporary posture where the faith creates a space for this to happen so that you can do a greater work for your faith is also possible. And understanding that you're encased in the biology, that God made you as a biological, physical being, and just as the universe has rules, and those rules are important for the function of the universe, could it be that what you're going through may require not just a spiritual response, but a physical response? So that means that maybe you do have to exercise, or maybe you do have to take a pill, or maybe you do have to remove a habit, that kind of thing, to protect the house that you're in, that you're living in, that kind of thing, right? So you guys, I'm preaching to the choir here, to use the analogy, but that's the idea.
It's a great foundation to have, and a way to tie into, their self-acceptance during the course of a season or going through a struggle or an injury. It's also just a great way to get to know a person and know
Yeah.
how they think and how they think about
Yes.
themselves and the world and their relationship with the creator. And in baseball, chapel is on Sundays and they're playing ball, but there's usually a men's group, praying somewhere.
I saw, hey, Tommy, I see a lot of praying, man. I do. I see a lot of spirituality and praying in sports across the sports. It's an underrated area, and it should, Lord, at
It is.
least included. Yeah,
I agree. For the not to be forced upon, but to understand that part of them, and can be deeply inspirational and motivating. When you were talking, I gotta say, you talked about David and Goliath, and there's no one taller in the NBA than Wemby. So I was picturing this David and Goliath situation there.
That's true.
Yeah, but Brunson's no David, so I guy's a floor general. Man, we went deep, and I'm really glad we did, because this is such an important topic. And I remember when I was in training, one of the rotations I did was an ethics rotation, where Yoshi would talk about ecumenical stuff and learn about all faiths, and see how there was a connection and how you could really connect with someone on a much deeper level. But when we talk about athletes, they're playing a child's game, but now later in life, and it's become fused as part of their identity. And so my question to you, Dr. Sweet, is how do you help an athlete separate who they are from what they do?
That's a great question. A lot of it starts in the very beginning, going back to the question about the role and when and what is a typical day like and when does it start. All relationships have a beginning to me, and I feel as if that beginning moment is sacred, because it's in that moment, for me, in my experience, where you get to understand how this person sees themselves. Are they the number on their jersey? Are they the sport they play? And you have to ask those questions in subtle ways. So tell me about your life. Tell me the kinds of questions you guys are asking me, that gets me to talk so openly and freely. And I think what happens for me is when I do things like, tell me your favorite food, it throws people off, right? My initial evaluation is, I want to know your favorite foods. I want to know your favorite TV show, your favorite actor, 3 words that describe you and why. If you could be a car, what kind of car are you going to be? And tell me about that. Something that really annoys you that nobody knows about. And this is a little bit of a morbid one, but what would you want somebody to come by your tombstone and say? If you could wear a T-shirt for the rest of your life and it had to have one phrase, what would that phrase be? These kinds of questions, they seem kind of fun, and they could be like party questions, breakers. But what they do is number one, they're not clinical and they don't feel clinical. And number 2, they often reveal who they are and gets them to talk about who they are. And then number 3, what happens is, as we go deeper into the season, I can come back to you and say, well, when was the last time you listened to Sade? Or when was the last time you said you love nature, you love fishing? It's another way to bring back in the humanity, bring back into the parts of the individual that don't often get expressed because they have to wear the helmet every day or they have to wear the armor every day. So grounding conversation that asks them about personal things that matter to them, that helps shape parts of who they are, their identity, and that actually serves a role in the sports psychiatry journey where we can come back to these things. How do you said that this was your phrase. You said whatever it is that you said that identified you. You said you would take your keys, your PlayStation, and your dog out of the house if there were a fire when we first met. Well, we have a fire right now. Have you pet your dog? What are you doing? The things that matter to you, do they still matter? So again, people look at us as sports psychiatrists and they think, oh, a clinical law, this is about Suboxone, or no, this is about Prozac, right? But it's so much more than that. It's these minor, micro conversations about getting to know who you are that we can help you plug back into that and recover that so that you can be a person in all of it. And if we do have to do something clinical, we're not just throwing something at you. It's because we understand you. We know what you're losing or we know what you want to gain. And we want to safely help you achieve that. And sometimes that might mean we have to start a medication, or we have to remove a habit, or we have to get into some counseling or refer you to this kind of person and walk in the room with you to the other kind of provider that you need. That's really the role that I feel sports psychiatry plays. And the beauty of us is that we can often do several things at once, which is to evaluate you clinically, to understand you as a person, to provide direct treatment if necessary, which could involve medications, or we can
Hmm.
monitor your blood work. You can come in and say, "Hey, my internal medicine person said that my calcium is high and that this is high," and we can understand. But we're doctors, we can understand that blood work and talk to you relationally about what's happening in your blood work. We don't advise you on what we do. More than likely, we're going to tell you, go back and ask your doctor these questions, or what does it mean to you that the doctor said that? Right? The fact that we can understand chemistry and labs, and we can understand medical conditions that might be impacting you, offers a great value to individuals who may not necessarily want a psychotherapy session, but they need some reassurance around something clinical, medical, that we can jump into that role as well.
Amen. I did not want to cut you off at all there because those last 4 or 5 sentences encapsulate exactly why we're here, to spread that message of the full breadth of what a sports psychiatrist can do. And it's at the end of the day, it's a very humanistic field that we've entered. And, that's why we're in this business and this helping ministry, if you will. But not always is that relationship, perfect. And I love how you get to know these players or coaches on a very personal level because you connect with them as fully as a human, not just as what they do. Now, the media, the business that is surrounding all of this gets intense, and there's a lot of scrutiny around these individuals we work with. So my next question would be, with all of social media, public opinion, how do you continue to be constant and therapeutic, like you just mentioned, with all of these other things going on around them?
Yeah, it's a challenge. It's a challenge. I think being a background individual, being someone who doesn't play in the foreground, in many ways, I don't exist. So in the ecosystem, even though I do have a role,
You're back
I
to the couch. You're the
back
couch
to
again.
being the couch. Back to being the piece of furniture. It actually helps because it doesn't create a competitive moment for them, because athletes and performers all around are always trying to find solace in spaces where they can be safe, where they don't have to always maybe sign something or have to be something for someone else, which is a role that they have to play so often, that having something in the background that's safe, that doesn't want anything from them, is not in some ways putting a demand on them, is important. I do have a podcast that I do called The Sweet Spot. It's more motivational. It's very, doesn't do a lot of science. It does science, soul, and success stuff, but in a way that's very palatable and easy for anybody to plug into. And it's out there in the universe. So if someone doesn't want to talk to me, they can plug into that. I do use a lot of infographics, and I put together my own posters and posts that speak to certain things, and that I circulate among various teams with performers that want it. I think you have to, as a sports psychiatrist, you can't be just limited to being in the office. You have to be comfortable with being in the background. You have to be comfortable floating around, and you have to be comfortable being in social media in a way that doesn't say, I am the team psychiatrist for this
Hmm.
team. And as a result of that, I'm important, that whole thing. So I'm very careful. If you look at my social media, you won't see you probably will not see anything that's related to teams generally. There may be subtle juxtapositioning of certain themes, but nothing along those lines. I think that gives organizations a certain level of confidence, and the ecosystem can trust this because you're not trying to promote yourself. One of the biggest dangers I see with young sports psychiatrists in general is that they are fans of the
Yep.
team that they work with. And you can
Hmm.
just look at their social media and you can see that this is more fan-based presentation than it is anything else. Now, there's a role for that and there's a place for that. But if you are really working with a team, unless the team has asked you to do it and the team wants this, often that creates a friction in the teams because teams are and organizations are very, very circumspect about guarding their brand and guarding what's being said out there. Sports, as you all both know very
Hmm.
well, it's
Hmm.
a closed environment when you go in there. And so I've had to work with some younger docs to just help them understand that and grasp it because it's very easy to get caught up. We in the football at the Jets where I work, we do have a sports psychiatry fellowship. It's very informal. It's not a certified thing. It's just an experiential. It's more like an externship. It really is a clerkship or an apprenticeship where we bring in junior level sports psychiatrists to get an experience there to do some training. And usually we take only advanced individuals, people who have already done work in psychiatry. They've had great clinical experience. They're typically board certified or at least have had several years of experience in the community, and we bring them in. And I think the hardest thing that I've seen is to not be a fan,
Yeah.
right? I'm working with somebody who's a superstar that I've adored for years, and I have to find a way to not go up and ask for an autograph, to not seem giddy or starry-eyed when I'm talking to them. Also can't cater to everything they want and sort of be a sycophant.
Hmm.
How do I do that? And also how do I not wear the gear to if I go out to Starbucks, I don't want to be dressed up in all the gear, all the team gear, that kind of thing. You'll be surprised how that isn't taught in any textbook, but you have to learn how to find your boundary and know how to not appear that way because you lose credibility quickly, even though nobody says it to you, but it's observed. And then if you go online and go on social media and you start posting about what you've done and people are seeing you with pictures next to this person or you're taking pictures of the training facility and you're suddenly in front of all of that, unless the team has asked you to do that or it's something that the culture wants. And I know very few teams typically like that. You can be in a lot of trouble. Also, yeah, so there's a lot of ways that we have to train clinical clinicians when they come on board into an embedded situation as to how to navigate this and to also understand, like, you may not have an office. Your office, you may have to find an office to see someone, or that your session might be 15 minutes as opposed to 45,
You
or
take
it may
what you
be,
can get. Yeah,
huh?
yeah.
You
Hey,
take
you
what you,
take what you can get, and
yeah,
just be careful. Don't go in the orthopedic surgeon's office for too long because they might need it. And not
yeah,
saying that's happened to me, but maybe it has. Uh,
exactly.
and I think that's all really valuable advice. I think we haven't broken it down, Mark, but I think there are some aspiring sports psychiatrists out there who might be listening to this, and this
Hmm.
is all really good advice. And also, Derek, I really appreciate you having the boldness to be a mentor and to create a fellowship and bring people into the space. There's
Yep.
not a lot of learning opportunities. Obviously, Mark and I are big on the ABSPP pathway and just creating more opportunities because you've paved the way, but we want to see more psychiatrists in this space, as well as other clinicians from other fields. There's so much need out there. We're talking a lot about professional sport, but you can get plugged in at the little league level. You can plug yourself into high school and collegiate athletics. There's so many opportunities out there that just want to create that ecosystem with you. This has been so valuable the past, 60 minutes here with you. It's flown by for me. I think we have a lot of content that we'd love to have another Saturday morning conversation.
Yes.
But I think it's time for rapid fire.
Let's do it.
If you're okay with that. So rapid fire round, just give us a quick answer. What's on your mind?
Rapid fire. Okay.
Get to know you. Yeah. So coffee or tea? What do you prefer?
Coffee.
Okay.
That's
All
what I'm
right.
thinking right now, as a matter of fact.
Nice. Working my third cup. Favorite book?
Yeah.
Favorite book? As a Man Thinketh, I think, at James Allen, if I had to choose one.
Very good. Most underrated mental skill?
My most underrated mental skill?
In
Or
general.
really the
What do you
most underrated mental skill? Let me think about that for a second. Oh, well, don't think about it. I would say listening.
Love that. Most overrated wellness trend?
I think it's mindfulness.
Okay. What's one thing that every coach should stop saying?
Let's go. Let's get it.
Okay. One thing every parent should say more often?
I love you.
What's your favorite recovery habit?
Music.
Best advice you've ever received?
Live long and prosper.
Okay.
And if you weren't a psychiatrist,
I would be an author.
I think you are an author.
Okay, thank you.
One daily habit that's made the biggest difference in your own life?
Waking up and expressing gratitude before I leave the bed.
Awesome. All right, Derek, this has been awesome.
You guys are the best, man.
But before we let you go, where can people find your work?
So it's easy. I'm on TikTok, so I have a whole lot of TikTok posts. I'm also on Instagram. There's a whole lot there. I'm on LinkedIn. And then I also have a website. It's Full Circle Confidential, where we talk about what we do in the private practice. And so those would be the easiest ways to get to me. I also have Full Circle Health, our community practices there as well.
and we'll have a link to all those resources in the show notes for our listeners.
So, Derek, congratulations again on an incredible championship season and for all the work that you do. Thank you very much for joining us. And thank you for everything you're doing to advance sports psychiatry and athlete mental health. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you so much, guys. And I'll tell you, the work that you're doing with the American Board of Sports Psychiatry is critical and important. And even for us on the ground, clinicians like myself on the ground, when the folks come through, having been through the board and the training and all of what you're doing, it's so critical. It helps us get the right kinds of people into the fellowships. And I think we're working in partnership here. And I'm grateful for the fact that you all exist. Thank you so much.
We really appreciate that.
Yeah.
So if you enjoyed today's conversation, we'd love it if you would subscribe, leave us a review, and share the episode with someone who's passionate about athlete mental health.
And we'll be back soon with more conversations featuring leaders from across sports medicine, psychiatry, psychology, coaching, nutrition, and performance science.
Until next time, take care of yourselves, take care of one another, and remember, the strongest athletes aren't simply physically healthy, they're mentally healthy too. Thanks for listening to the Peak Sports Psychiatry Podcast.